Howdy folks, I'm here to do a emergency fishing kit video. A friend of mine asked me, wanted my advice on what should be in an emergency fishing kit. So that's why I'm here today, so I'm doing the video. Anyway, I've looked at some of the emergency fishing kits that you can get online through Amazon, whatever. Not too crazy about those. Part of the reason for that is because when you're talking about a true emergency fishing kit, you really don't need very much. There's just a few basics that you do need. Plus that, what I was noticing in the fishing kits is how heavy the line is that they're using in there. We're talking 20, 30 pound tests. You just don't need line that heavy. A line that's that heavy, the heavier it is, the easier it's seen. Fish are sometimes spooked by that. If they notice the line, they'll spook them away. So, anyway, what do you need in a fishing kit? Fishing hooks. I recommend the ones you can get that have the leader already attached to them. The reason I do suggest that is because if you get just a plain hook, like so, you have to attach your line to it. You can attach your line straight to it. Yes, you can do that. But regular fishing line, and this is 20-pound test. That's pretty heavy stuff. I'm using this so you can all see it. The thinner stuff is harder to see. You can attach that straight to the hook. But if you compare that to the leader, that's considerably thicker. You want a good leader on there because fish have teeth, for one. They can bite through that sometimes if it's not very thick. Trout have teeth, but especially if you're fishing in waters with northern pike. Northern pike have very sharp teeth and they can bite right through that. In that case, I would suggest something like this. This is a steel leader, and you can hook that directly to the hook. Anyway, what I like to do with this setup is I like to tie on another leader on top of that, just to kind of give you some room to work. And you can use regular fishing line for this. Then at the end of that leader, I use what's called a snap, or if I can find it, I seem to have misplaced it. I grab another one. A snap swivel, I guess is what you would really call that. And you can hook that. I like to tie my fishing line to the end of that. Let me hook it up here. And the reason I do that instead of tying the fishing line straight to the leader is because when you want to switch something out, say you want to put on a fresh leader, all you gotta do is unhook it. You don't have to retie it to the fishing line. If you're going to use leaders or jigs, you can hook it straight to that also. Or if you want to hook on a steel leader, you can hook that straight to it also. That's the advantage of using a swivel. The other a snap swivel. The other reason why you want to use a swivel is because it allows whatever you use to twist, whether it's a lure or, if you're pulling something through the water like the bait. It allows it to twist, and it doesn't twist your line. If you twist your line, it can get all tangled up. Line has what's called memory. The memory on a line, what it is it has a tendency to stay the shape that it is when it's on the spool or on the reel. Especially if you haven't used it in a while, which if you got an emergency kit, it may sit in your backpack for quite some time. But when it hasn't been used in a while, it has a tendency to retain the shape of the spool or the reel. One thing you can do to get rid of that, if you're having trouble, and the reason why you don't want that is because if it winds up, retains the shape, it'll coil up on you. When it coils up on you, it tangles very easily. Tangles in your fishing line is not good. But one thing you can do to fix that problem, when you get out the line, pull out several feet of it, and then you can use this. This is a line stripper, I think is what you would call that. It's just a piece of leather. This is, fly fishermen use these a lot. They have run across that quite a bit on their leader, on their fly line. Speaking of fly fishing, I don't recommend fly equipment, fly rods for an emergency fishing kit, or flies. And I'll get back to why you don't want to use flies, imitation flies. But fly fishing, I love to do it. It's what I normally do. But in an emergency situation, it's not the most efficient way to catch fish. Bait is probably the best way. You can use lures, but I'll get back to that on why you don't want to use lures. So anyway, I was talking about the line stripper. What you do on this when it coils up is you just put your line in it, between it, you want to squeeze it tight, you pull it through. That's all you do. Takes the coils right out of there. You don't have to spend money on an official fly line stripper. You can just buy a cheap piece of leather somewhere, but leather works best. Not sure what else you do. I mean, you can use your hands. It'll burn if you do it too much. It'll actually create a burn on your fingers. Anyway, but that's what you can do to take the coils out of your line. So at the top of my leader, like I said, I put in the snap swivel. You hook that on. This is already tied to your line. And then, why would a fish bite your hook? Because there's something on the end of your hook that they want. Bait. That's what I recommend for an emergency fly fishing kit. It's the most efficient way to catch fish. You hear about flies. The fly fishermen use imitation flies. And you hear about lures. Honestly, just not the most efficient way to get it. Why would a fish hit something imitation when they can get real food? What do you use for bait? Probably the most tried and true thing I've seen, and probably the best thing out there, is just worms, night crawlers. For the big ones, what they call them here in the States. Those are the best. Bigger than, something like that big and juicy, you bet a fish is going to go after that. Like I said, why would they go after something imitation if they can go after some real food? With a night crawler, what I do with a night crawler, as far as putting it on the hook, I like to take the worm or night crawler and just kind of put it up the end of it and run it up the line. That way it just kind of hangs freely. Sometimes you take an extra loop, put it through the hook again, and so it just kind of hangs naturally. The more natural it looks, the more appetizing it's going to look toward the fish. Other types of bait you can use. There is salmon eggs. That's a real popular thing here in Colorado, here in the States. Use salmon eggs. Fish love that. You can use what's called power bait. That's real popular here in the States. It comes in all shapes and sizes and colors. This is orange, kind of a nuggets. You can put on your hook, one or two of those. They also come in, it's almost like an egg shape. That's the pink ones. They come in hundreds of colors. There's all kinds of them you can get. The downside to that, you got the weight of a jar in the emergency kit. An emergency fishing kit, you want to keep light. Don't want it bulky. Just the basics. So you may not want to put something like that in your emergency fishing kit. They do dry out. If you haven't used it in years, it will dry out. So what can you use for bait? If you don't want to do that, worms, like I said, you can dig up, I believe worms you can find worldwide. You can dig them up just about anywhere. Just about any kind of fish will hit worms. What else? Just about any kind of food. Fish like cheese, bread, lunch meat, something like that. Another thing that the trout especially like is corn. It's actually not legal to use here in Colorado, but in an emergency situation, it's what you got to do what you got to do. I wouldn't worry too much about it being illegal in that situation. All right. So how can you use this setup? first of all, you can use it just like I've explained it to you. You got a hook, you got a leader, hook it to a swivel, hook it to your line, take whatever bait you got on there, throw it out in the water. If the fish bites, goes after the bait or whatever, you hold on to the string and you feel it tugging, you got a fish, you pull it in. Excuse me. Set the hook. When it bites, you feel a tug, jerk up on it, sets the hook, kind of lodges the hook in there so it doesn't spit it out. How else can you use this? Okay, so that was your basic fishing kit. That is really all you need. A lot of the other things I'm going to explain now are things that will make it easier. But keep in mind, the more things you have in your emergency fishing kit, the bigger it's going to be, the bulkier and heavier. So basically all this other stuff I'm going to explain to you is just going to make it easier. And you can use your better judgment to decide what you want to use in your emergency fishing kit and how it's going to benefit you. Or if you don't think it'll be that much of a benefit, don't put it in there. Okay? So probably the best way is with what they call a float or a bobber. That is a bobber. The way it works is you hook it on, I like to hook it just below the swivel on the leader, and you hook it on there, and then you have your fishing line coming off back to you off there. You throw that out there in the water, and then when it sits on top, because that's full of air, your bait hangs down below, and then when a fish grabs your bait, grabs your hook, what does it do? It jerks down on it. The bobber bobs down. That's why they call it a bobber. When it's doing that, you got a fish. Pull it in. And now there are several different sizes of bobbers and colors. Orange, red and white, either one, whatever you can see easier. Different sizes. I've seen them as large as 3 inches in diameter. Not really necessary for a lake or stream, but keep in mind, the larger the bobber, the more it weighs, easier it is to get it out a distance, whether you're throwing it out there or you're casting it out with a fishing pole. You can get it out there farther. The bad part of that is because it is heavier, when it hits the water, it splashes, makes more noise, can spook the fish away. So in that case, if you're worried about spooking the fish, use a smaller bobber. When it hits the water, it doesn't splash as much. So in that situation, you just got to use your own judgment to what's going to work and in what situation. The smaller the bobber, the better. It doesn't spook them as much, but you can't get out as far. Like if you're fishing stream, you're not getting your bait out there that far anyway, so it works fairly well. All right. How else can you fish? Well, you can fish off the bottom. Fishing off the bottom, you need to get your bait down to the bottom. You don't use a bobber. You use weights. There are several different weights that you can use. You can use something like this. This is what's called, let me see if I can hold it so you can see it. That's called an egg weight. It's got a hole down the middle of it. You run your line right through it, and up from where the swivel is, you got your line running through there. That's there. Now the advantage to this is when that's sitting on the bottom of the lake and a fish picks up your hook off the bottom and starts to run with it, it pulls the string through the weight, so it doesn't have to pull the weight for you to feel the fish pulling on the line. That's a major advantage to this type of weight. The disadvantage to this is it can kind of fray your line being pulled back and forth through it. Another type of weight I like to use is these, kind of like those. Anyway, and you can attach this straight to the snap swivel if you like. Another way you can use it is you can build a leader and have this down at the bottom of the leader, and then attach your hook above this so it comes off to the side, And the reason why you want to do that if you use this style is because still when the fish bites and pulls on the hook, it doesn't have to move the weight first. You feel it before it moves the weight. So keep that in mind if you use something like that. Now, a lot of times people will hook that straight to the swivel up from the hook. If it's not a real heavy weight and they're biting fairly hard, doesn't matter. You'll still feel the hit. But when they're biting real lightly, especially when the water's cold, don't recommend that type of setup. Disadvantages to fishing off the bottom. A lot of times you get snagged. What that is your hook gets either hooked on a log, maybe your weight gets caught on some rocks. You know, the weight will drop down there between two rocks and get wedged behind them. Not much you can do about that when it happens. There are tricks to get them unsnagged. But if you're not using a fly rod or if you're not using a fishing rod and reel, it's kind of tough to get it out of there. So, like I said, a lot of this stuff I am recommending to make it easier to fish. But do you really want to pack all this stuff in your emergency fly fishing kit? Because it's going to make it bigger and heavier. One thing that, now there's a reason, first of all, why anglers use rod and reel. There's a lot, it opens up your possibilities for what you can do when you're fishing considerably if you're using a rod and reel. This is the one I like to use when I'm packing in, you know, up in the hills or whatever. It's a 4-piece rod and reel. It's made by Eagle Claw, once again. This is the same company that makes the fishing hooks that I like to use. I don't remember if I said earlier, but these are, I believe, sold worldwide. This is a local company here in Colorado. You can get a package of those. There's 6 in a package. Size 6 is what I normally use for trout. Hopefully you don't need any more than 6 hooks. If you do, you're not doing something right or you're in trouble. Anyway, the rod. It's a 4-piece fishing rod. Packs up pretty small, very lightweight. It will not fit in your backpack. That is the downside to this. But it is pretty lightweight. It comes in its own case. You can throw it over. It's got a strap. You can or shoulder strap. You can put over your shoulder. You can strap it to the side of your backpack. You can put it on top of the backpack, down below, kind of where your sleeping bag would sit, if in a true backpacking sleeping bag. And a fishing reel. If you're going to use that, you need a fishing reel. I highly recommend, if you do not have much experience fishing, to use a closed face reel. What that is compared to an open face reel. This is an open face reel. The difference, the closed face reel, you can't see the string or the spool where the string is wrapped around. This one is wide open, hence open face reel. The closed face reel is just the easiest to use for a novice. Real easy to cast them. You're an expert almost right away when you start using these things. You can set the drag on these just like a open face reel. Saying the drag, I didn't talk about that earlier. If you're using a reel, you can set how tight the reel is. In other words, how hard you have to pull the string for it to come out. You want to set it a certain amount. You don't want it too tight, otherwise the fish will break your string. If it's too loose, then it'll run it all the way out and then snap it off when it gets to the end. But anyway, if you're going to use a rod and reel, I recommend using a closed face. Unless you have experience with the open face, then the open face is awful nice to work with. You can see more. Anyway, part of the like I said, you can't fish that. You can't put that rod in your backpack. It is too big for that. But it is very lightweight. As a matter of fact, that rod and reel is lighter than this bottle. This is 591 milliliters, and this is heavier full than that rod and reel. So as far as weight goes, not an issue. But once again, emergency fishing kit, If you are trying to keep it simple, it's one of the things you can not use. What else? A lot of what I talked about, I'm sorry, I'm backing up a minute here. I was talking about weights earlier. Another style of weight you can use, slip shot. That little tiny thing right there. It's like a little ball. And the way you use that, and sometimes people like to use these in conjunction with a bobber. You can put it down below the bobber on the string, and it'll kind of keep your bait down, but your bobber's still up, if you use a small enough one. These come in various sizes. This is actually one of the bigger ones. I grabbed the bigger one so you could see it easier. And what you do is you grab your string, and there's a slit in this thing, and you put the string right down the slit, and then you pinch it, and it clamps over it, and that's how that stays in place. And like I said, there's several different sizes. I've got this little package here. It's got several different sizes. You can kind of see them in there. Now, keep in mind, things I'm mentioning above and beyond the emergency fishing kit, just to make things easier. Weights do make it easier if you're fishing off the bottom. Like I said, you can use those slip shots in conjunction with a bobber. But they're weights. Fish a big wig like that. How many do you want to put in your emergency fishing kit? How much do you want to weight down? Obviously, if you're using a bigger weight, you don't want to put a lot of them in there. But something like that, that's not a whole lot of weight there. You'll probably be all right with that. Okay. So like I said, a lot of this stuff I am recommending just to make things easier. Fishing lures. That is fishing lure. That's a very big one. I'm using this to show you. There's all different types of fishing lures and jigs. Those emergency fishing kits that I saw had jigs and lures in them. If you're not using a rod and a reel, it's kind of pointless to even have those in your fishing kit, because you just can't use them efficiently without a rod and reel. Sure, you could pick yourself up a stick in the woods, tie your fishing line onto the end of the stick, hook a jig to it, weight it down, and you could jig the jig. But lure, absolutely forget it. Unless you got a rod and a reel. Anyway, so what else? Now I'm going to kind of touch on survival gear. And the reason why I'm doing that is because some of the stuff you'll use with your survival gear will come in handy with your emergency fishing kit. One thing that's very important you want to have is a multi-tool. Swiss Army knives are great. Don't get me wrong, they're a great product. However, the multi-tool, almost all of them, and as a matter of fact, I haven't seen one without it, all of them have needle nose pliers built into them. That comes in very handy. When you're bait fishing, a good part of the time, the fish will swallow the hook. You won't just set it right in their mouth. It'll go down, clear down in their gut. You want to get it out there, get it out of there so you can reuse the hook. If you got this, you can reach down there, grab that hook, pull it out of there. These also come with a variety of features: knife, flat-bladed screwdrivers, bottle opener. The other side, you got a file you can use to sharpen your hooks. You got a can opener, Phillips screwdriver. There's a number of things you can get these with. First of all, I recommend buying quality. You definitely want to spend the money to buy a better quality product. If it's a cheap one and it breaks, it ain't going to do you any good anyway. So you might as well spend the money on a better quality one. Same thing with a survival knife. That's the next thing I'm going to talk about. You want a good survival knife. Something like that. If you get a cheap one, it breaks, it's not going to do you any good. This is a Ka-Bar. I literally looked around for quite some time before I finally bought this one. Got it on sale. It's hard to find these on sale because they sell. Why would a manufacturer put it on sale if he's going to sell it anyway? Anyway, good product. You want to make sure you get a good one because, like I said, ain't going to do you any good if it doesn't work. Not a bad idea to get one with serrated edge. You can use it to cut wood if you have to. You can use it to dig holes, get them worms, use as bait. The packable shovels, not a good idea. Yeah, they work great, but they're heavy and bulky. You can dig a hole with that, get to your worms. You want to make sure it's in a good case and carry that in a spot where you can get to it fast if you have to. Anyway, other things you want in your, along with your survival gear, you would probably want a first aid kit. It's your basic first aid kit. You want to make sure it has bandages, whatever in there. Matches. There's a million ways to start a fire. This is the easiest, best way to do it. Waterproof container, waterproof matches. Right there, you can strike that on a lot of different things, rocks, leather. If you're real tough, you can strike it on your beard. Don't recommend it. And you will eventually run out of matches. Well, hopefully you don't, but if you do, keep one of these. This is a striker. You can use this to start sparks on kindling and start a fire that way. Use your knife on it, scrape that along this, and it sends sparks, and you can create a fire that way. Compass. Definitely want a compass and learn how to use it. I've got a very great, a real good sense of direction, but you always want a compass. Map, topographical map. If you can, pack along a topographical map of the area you're going to be in. I actually don't use them very often because I am a map nut. I look at maps all the time. Google Maps. I study the area where I'm going ahead of time. So a lot of times I'm fairly well educated and prepared when I go out. But if you're in an emergency situation, you can't always do that. You may not be able to grab a topographical map, but start off with one in the area where you're at, where you think you might be going. I have several of them. So, maps. What else do you need? Rain poncho. Rain ponchos are great. They keep you dry. Bad side, they're heavy. So keep that in mind when you're trying to pack light. An alternative to that is, I think I've heard these called space blankets. It's basically just a reflective sheet. It will help keep you warm. It will reflect heat back to your body when you wrap up in it. It will keep you dry. Not very thick, not very durable, but in an emergency situation, it will do the job. Another thing it will be good at, reflecting light. If an airplane or a helicopter is overhead, they're more likely to spot you if you got this wrapped around you. Speaking of that, can't remember what you call it now. A mirror. Just a spot mirror, I guess you could call it. Also very good for reflecting light. If you're trying to get a hold of it, if you're trying to be noticed by an airplane or a helicopter, yeah, you want to be able to reflect the sun back up to them. I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about the fishing kit. I found this just maybe Walmart, just regular sporting goods store. This little cardboard thing talks all about fishing knots. If you don't know how to tie a fishing knot, it's not going to do you a lot of good to try to go fishing. You need to be able to tie a knot that will stay, will not slip, and stay tight. will not come loose. Speaking of that, do not use spit or saliva to cinch up your fishing knots. It is an acid. It will deteriorate the knot. Use water. Do not dry cinch. And what I mean by that, you tie your knot, get it ready, and then you pull it tight. That's cinching the knot. If you cinch it dry, it will not cinch correctly. It will come loose, won't stay. If your knot doesn't stay, it's not any good to you. If you use water, then it'll cinch tighter, and hence the knot will be tighter and stay together better. All right, anything else I need to talk about here? Something else to have in your survival kit, extra shoelaces. I need to wrap those up and tidy them up a bit. Another thing I found, nice and lightweight. You know, I talked about being able to cut wood with your survival knife. This is something else. It's real handy. It is actually a cable saw. Hook your fingers in that. You go across the back and forth. You can actually cut wood with that. Obviously, that's not very heavy. That easily fits in your backpack or your emergency kit. So that's something else to keep in mind. And at this point, I think I've mentioned everything that I needed to mention. I hope this information is useful to you. I hope you don't need to use this information, but if you do, there it is. I wish you the best. Have a great day.